I loved her for years and always believed there would be a perfect moment to say it. The night she finally asked me one question, I realized it was already too late. I realized too late that the most dangerous words are the ones you rehearse so often that they start to feel already said. The first time it hit me, it was not fireworks or some big movie moment. It was a Tuesday night, nothing special. I was standing in her kitchen, barefoot on cold tile, watching her stir pasta sauce like she had done 100 times before. The window was cracked open because she liked the smell of rain, and the radio was low, some old song neither of us really listened to. She reached for salt without looking, and I handed it to her before she even asked. That was the moment. Not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet click inside my chest, like something settling into place. Her name was Emily. American as it gets. Brown hair that never quite stayed where she wanted it. A laugh that came out faster than she could stop it. We had met in a way that felt accidental, which made it feel honest. A mutual friend, a half-forgotten gathering. A conversation that started about nothing and somehow never really ended. At first, I told myself what I felt was comfort. Familiarity. That warm ease you get when someone starts to feel like part of your routine. We had routines fast. Coffee on Sundays at the same diner. Late walks when neither of us could sleep. Texts that did not need punctuation because meaning had already been established. Her toothbrush appeared in my bathroom without discussion. My jacket lived on the back of her chair. I noticed things before I named them. The way I adjusted my schedule without thinking so I could see her. How her bad days bothered me more than my own. How silence with her never felt empty, just full of something calm and shared. Still, I did not say the words. I told myself I was being careful, responsible. That rushing things ruined them. Inside my head, I built a whole courtroom to justify my silence. Timing mattered. Love was heavy. Once said, it changed the rules. I needed certainty, not just comfort dressed up as something bigger. I had been wrong before. I had mistaken intensity for depth, closeness for permanence. This felt different, which somehow made it scarier. Emily never asked me directly how I felt. That should have been my first clue. She would pause sometimes, like she was waiting for something I did not give. Her eyes would linger on me when she thought I was not looking. When friends teased us about being a couple, she smiled but watched my reaction more than theirs. I laughed it off every time, easy and non-committal, like I was protecting us from something fragile. I told myself there would be a better moment, a cleaner one, maybe a weekend away, maybe after some imagined milestone that would make the words feel earned. Until then, I kept them just under my tongue, close enough to taste, far enough to stay safe. What I did not understand then was that silence is not neutral. It does not sit still. It moves. It fills space. It teaches people how to live without hearing what they need. And while I was busy waiting for the right moment, something subtle had already begun to shift, quietly, just out of my line of sight. If you had asked me back then why I had not said it, I would have given you a list so polished it almost sounded mature. I told myself I was being intentional, that I respected what we had too much to rush it. Love, in my mind, was not something you tossed out lightly, like a casual compliment. It was a commitment, a door you could not unopen once you stepped through. I believed that once the words were spoken, expectations followed, future followed, pressure followed, and I was not afraid of her. I was afraid of failing whatever those words demanded afterward. I had been in relationships where I said it too soon, where the word burned hot and fast, then fizzled into something awkward and resentful. I remembered the fights that came after, the way love became a weapon instead of a bridge. I promised myself I would never say it again unless I was absolutely sure. Not mostly sure. Not hopeful. Certain. The problem was that certainty became a moving target. Every time I felt close to saying it, I found a reason to wait. Work stress. Bad timing. The idea that things were going so well that I did not want to risk changing the dynamic. I convinced myself that actions mattered more anyway. That she could feel it without hearing it. That showing up, listening, being there counted for more than 3 words ever could. Emily was not dramatic about what she needed, which made it easier to ignore. She did not demand reassurance or corner me into defining us. Instead, she asked small questions, the kind that felt casual but landed heavy. Questions about plans months from now, about where I saw myself living in a few years, about whether I believed people really knew when something was forever. I answered carefully, honestly, but carefully. I talked about possibilities instead of promises. I used words like maybe and probably, and we will see. She nodded every time, but something in her posture shifted, just slightly, like she was bracing herself without admitting it. There were moments when I almost said it. Once, after she fell asleep on my chest, breathing slow and even, her hand resting like it belonged there. I stared at the ceiling, heart loud in my ears, the words fully formed in my mouth. Another time, when she showed up at my place late at night because she had a rough day and did not want to be alone. She did not cry. She just sat beside me, shoulder to shoulder, and that quiet trust felt bigger than anything I had known. Still, I stayed silent. I told myself that if she really needed to hear it, she would ask. That if it was a deal breaker, she would make it one. That my hesitation was caution, not fear. I did not want to admit that part of me liked the safety of being wanted without being fully known. Liked having the benefits of love without the vulnerability of naming it. Then there were the signs I explained away. She stopped leaving things at my place. Just small stuff at first. A sweater disappeared. Then her spare charger. She started packing up more deliberately when she left, like she was reminding herself not to settle in too deeply. Her messages changed tone. Still warm, still caring, but lighter. Less assumed. She began saying things like if instead of when. She no longer talked about us like we were a given. I noticed all of it, but I framed it as normal. Healthy even. I told myself relationships breathe. That closeness ebbs and flows. That this was just a phase. What I did not see was that while I was waiting for certainty, she was slowly learning how to live without it. And once someone starts doing that, they do not usually announce it out loud. They just begin to step back, one quiet inch at a time. And I was about to learn how loud that distance could become. Distance does not always arrive like a slammed door. Sometimes it shows up like a chair moved a few inches back from the table, subtle enough that you do not notice until the room feels wrong. Emily did not stop calling. She did not disappear. That would have been easier to understand. Instead, she stayed present in a way that felt slightly dimmer, like someone turning the lights down without telling you why. She still laughed at my jokes, but she laughed quicker, like she did not want to linger there. She still listened when I talked about my day, but her questions stopped digging deeper. She started accepting my words at face value instead of searching for what lived underneath them. I noticed first in the pauses. The space between messages stretched just enough to make me check the time twice. When we made plans, she stopped anchoring them. If I said maybe Saturday, she said that works instead of great. If I had to reschedule, she did not seem disappointed anymore. She adapted too easily, like she had already practiced letting go. Once, we ran into someone she knew from work. They asked what I was to her. It was casual, almost careless. I waited, heart tapping against my ribs, for how she would answer. She smiled and said my name. Just my name. No label. No explanation. The conversation moved on, but something cold settled in my stomach. I told myself not to read into it. That labels were overrated. That what we had was deeper than words. Still, that night, I lay awake replaying it, wondering when my silence had turned into her uncertainty. There were moments when she reached for clarity without asking outright. She would talk about friends who rushed into things and got hurt, then glance at me like she was waiting to see which side of that story I landed on. She mentioned how exhausting it was to invest in something without knowing where it was going. I nodded, agreed in theory, but never connected it back to us out loud. The truth was, I felt something tightening around me, and instead of leaning into it, I froze. Part of me sensed that if I named what I felt, I would also have to confront the risk of losing it. As long as the words stayed unspoken, I could pretend we were still standing on solid ground. Then came the first real crack. She canceled our Sunday diner routine, said she needed time to herself. She had never done that before. When I asked if everything was okay, she said yes too quickly. The next week, she canceled again. This time, she did not suggest another day. I remember sitting alone at the booth we always took, coffee cooling in front of me, realizing I had started to feel like a guest in something that used to feel mutual. The waitress asked if someone else was joining me. I said no without thinking, and the word echoed longer than it should have. I started to panic quietly, not enough to act, but enough to feel the walls shifting. I thought about finally saying it, just blurting it out, breaking the tension like glass. But another voice in my head warned me not to do it out of fear. Love should not be a reaction, it said. It should be steady, certain. So I waited. Again. What I did not know then was that while I was arguing with myself about timing, Emily had already begun making a decision of her own. Not loudly, not angrily, just carefully. And once someone starts preparing their heart for absence, they rarely turn back without a reason strong enough to stop them. I just did not know yet that I was running out of chances to be that reason. The thing about realizing you might be losing someone is that your instincts do not suddenly get smarter. They get louder. Messier. And mine kept arguing with itself instead of doing anything useful. I told myself Emily just needed space. That this was healthy. That I was overthinking it. But I also started doing quiet math in my head, replaying the timeline, counting how many weeks it had been since she last leaned into me instead of standing beside me. How long since she talked about the future without sounding like she was describing a place she might not visit. Then something happened that broke the illusion I had been clinging to. She got sick. Nothing dramatic. A bad flu that knocked her flat for a few days. Normally, I would have been the first person she called. Soup runs. Sitting on the edge of the bed. Small caretaking things that made us feel like a team. This time, I found out through a social media post. A picture of tea on her nightstand. A caption about hating being stuck in bed. I stared at my phone longer than I want to admit. I texted her right away, asked how she was feeling, offered to come by. She responded politely, warmly even, but said she already had it handled. A friend from work had dropped things off. She did not want to risk getting me sick. It was reasonable, logical, and it hurt more than if she had just said no. That was when it finally clicked that I was no longer her first call. I was not her default. I had slipped into a secondary role without ever being informed of the demotion. And the worst part was that I could trace exactly how it happened. Every moment I chose caution over honesty. Every time I waited instead of speaking. I almost said it then. Almost. The words pressed so hard against my chest that I felt short of breath. But the timing felt wrong again. She was sick. Vulnerable. Saying it then felt like pressure, like a move made to pull her back instead of meet her where she was. So I waited. Again. When she got better, she thanked me for checking in, but there was a formality to it that scared me. We met up a few days later for a walk. Not a date. Just a walk. That alone said more than anything else. She talked about work, about a new project, about how busy she had been. She did not reach for my hand. I did not reach for hers. At one point, she mentioned she had been thinking a lot lately. About what she wanted. About clarity. She said it lightly, like she was testing the word in her mouth. I nodded like an idiot and said that made sense. That was my opening. I see that now. A wide, obvious opening. I did nothing. That night, I went home and sat in the dark, replaying everything. The kitchen, the routines, the almost moments. I finally admitted the truth I had been dodging. I was not waiting because I needed certainty. I was waiting because I was afraid that once I said it, I would find out whether it was enough. And now, I was starting to suspect that my silence had already given her an answer. The next morning, I woke up to a message from her that changed the weight of the air in the room before I even finished reading it. She said she thought we needed to talk. And suddenly, every moment I had saved those words felt like borrowed time that had just run out. When someone says we need to talk, your body reacts before your mind catches up. My stomach dropped, my hands went cold, and suddenly every excuse I had ever made lined up in front of me like witnesses waiting to testify. We met at her place. Not my idea. She used to come to mine more often, said it felt easier, more relaxed. This time, she chose her space, and that alone told me the ground rules had shifted. Her apartment looked the same, but it felt different, like I was walking through a place I no longer belonged to in the same way. Cleaner somehow, less lived in. The jacket I used to leave on the chair was gone. She did not waste time easing into it. She talked calmly, carefully, like someone who had already practiced the words. She said she had been doing a lot of thinking, that she cared about me deeply, that what we had mattered. Past tense slipped in so smoothly, I almost missed it. She talked about uncertainty, about how hard it was to keep investing emotionally without knowing where she stood. She said she had not wanted to pressure me or force a label, that she had waited, hoping I would meet her in that space on my own. But waiting had started to feel like standing still while life kept moving. I listened. I nodded. I told myself not to interrupt, not to panic, not to say the words just yet. Part of me still believed there was a right moment, even now, that if I timed it correctly, everything could snap back into place. She said something that landed harder than everything else combined. She said silence makes people fill in the blanks themselves. And when you do that long enough, You usually prepare for the worst. That was when it finally hit me. She was not angry. She was tired. She explained that she had started pulling back not to punish me, but to protect herself. That loving someone without knowing if they loved you back changes how you see yourself. That she needed clarity, not promises, just honesty. When she finished, she looked at me and waited. The room felt impossibly quiet. My heart was racing, my mouth dry. The words were right there. I could feel them, heavy and undeniable. I loved her. I had loved her for longer than I wanted to admit. And now, the only thing standing between us was my own hesitation. I almost said it. But then fear crept in again, sharp and cruel. What if saying it now felt like a reaction instead of a truth? What if she heard desperation instead of certainty? What if I was already too late, and the words only made it harder? So I did the worst thing I could have done. I hesitated. Just for a second. Just long enough. Her expression changed. Not dramatically. Not with anger. Just a soft closing, like a door being pulled shut gently but firmly. She nodded to herself, like something had finally been confirmed. She said she needed time. Space. That she did not want to make any big decisions in the heat of emotion. That we should step back for a bit. I agreed, even though every instinct in me was screaming not to. We hugged, awkward and brief. When I left, she did not watch me go like she used to. Walking to my car, it finally became clear. Silence had not protected us. It had trained her to live without hearing what she needed most. And as I sat behind the wheel, hands gripping it too tightly, I realized with sick certainty that if I did not speak soon, I might never get another chance at all. Time does strange things when you are waiting for someone who asked for space. Days stretch out, then collapse into each other, and suddenly you cannot tell if it has been a week or a lifetime since you last felt close to them. Emily did not vanish after that conversation. That would have been cleaner. Instead, she existed at a careful distance. Occasional texts, short check-ins, nothing cold, but nothing intimate either. The kind of communication that says I am being polite, not hopeful. At first, I told myself this was temporary. That space meant reset, not retreat. I replayed our conversation in my head over and over, editing my responses, imagining alternate versions where I spoke faster, braver, earlier. In every version that felt right, I said the words. In reality, I still had not. I kept waiting for a moment that would not feel like panic. I wanted to say it from a place of strength, not fear. But fear had already moved in, rearranged the furniture, made itself comfortable. I noticed how quickly she adapted. She filled her time. Work events. Friends I had never met. New routines that did not include me. She stopped sharing the small details, the throwaway thoughts that used to make me feel chosen. When I asked how her day was, she answered fully but efficiently, like she was closing a loop instead of opening one. One night, scrolling without purpose, I saw a picture she posted. Nothing romantic. Just her sitting at a table with a group of people, smiling in a way that felt relaxed and unburdened. I was not there. I was not tagged. I was not mentioned. And the realization hit harder than jealousy ever could. She was okay. That was the twist I had not prepared for. I had assumed my silence hurt her more than it did. But it had not broken her. It had taught her how to redirect her energy somewhere safer. Somewhere that did not require waiting. I finally admitted the truth I had been circling for months. I had confused patience with protection. I thought waiting kept things intact. In reality, it slowly dismantled what we had, piece by piece, until there was nothing dramatic left to fight for. I drafted the message a dozen times. Each version felt either too heavy or too late. I told myself words still mattered, even now. That honesty was better than pride. That regret was heavier than rejection. When I finally hit send, my hands were shaking. I told her I loved her. No explanation. No justification. Just the truth I had carried quietly for too long. Then I waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then more. When her reply finally came, it was not immediate. It was thoughtful, measured. And before I even opened it, I knew something had already changed in a way I could not undo. Because love spoken late does not land the same as love spoken brave. And whatever she was about to say back to me had been shaped not by rejection, but by all the time I had chosen not to speak. I stared at her message for a long time before opening it, like the act itself might lock something in place I was not ready to accept. When I finally read it, my chest did not tighten the way I expected. It softened, and somehow, that felt worse. She said she appreciated my honesty, that the words mattered, that they were not nothing. She said she had wondered, more times than she could count, if I felt what she felt. She said hearing it now confirmed that she had not imagined things. That part of her felt relieved. Relief was not the word I wanted to hear. She went on, carefully, kindly. She said timing changes how love lands. That when you wait too long, people do not just pause their feelings. They reshape them. She said she had spent months slowly adjusting her expectations, convincing herself not to need what she was not being given. By the time I spoke, she had already done the work of letting go of wanting me in that way. I read the message 3 times, hoping it would change. She did not say she did not love me. That was the part that hurt the most. She said she still cared deeply, but care had become quieter, safer, less demanding. She said she was no longer in the place where my words could change what she needed to do next. I sat there, phone heavy in my hand, realizing something I had not prepared for. Saying it did not feel like relief. It felt like an ending finally given a name. I asked if we could talk in person. Not to argue, not to convince, just to be real, face to face. She agreed. We met a few days later at a park we used to walk through all the time. Same path, same benches, different gravity. She looked the same and not the same at all. Calmer, more grounded, like someone who had already made peace with a decision. We talked, slowly, honestly. She told me that for a long time, she had believed my silence meant I was unsure about her, that she was asking for more than I could give. Over time, she stopped asking herself why and started asking whether she wanted to keep waiting. She said something that still echoes in my head. She said she did not leave because I did not love her. She left because she could not keep loving someone who would not say it. I wanted to tell her that I had been afraid, that I thought I was protecting something fragile, that I did not realize I was the one weakening it. But explanations felt small compared to the time that had already passed. She listened anyway, always generous that way. She did not interrupt. She did not dismiss me. She just nodded, like she understood, even if it did not change anything. At the end, she hugged me. Longer than I expected. Not desperate, not hopeful, just sincere. As she walked away, I felt the full weight of what hesitation costs. Not explosively, not dramatically, just steadily, like something finally settling where it had been heading all along. And as I stood there alone, watching her disappear down the path, I realized the story was not over yet. Because acceptance does not arrive all at once. Sometimes it comes in pieces. And I still had one more truth to face before I could finally let go. After that day at the park, life did not fall apart the way I thought it might. That was almost insulting. The world kept moving. People laughed. Traffic stayed loud. Coffee still tasted the same. Loss, I learned, does not always announce itself with drama. Sometimes it just shows up as absence where something used to be. Emily did not cut me off. She did not ghost me or turn cold. We checked in occasionally, like two people carefully stepping around a scar that had not fully healed. Birthdays passed. Then holidays. Each one landed a little differently, like reminders of a life that might have kept unfolding if I had spoken sooner. I told myself I was handling it well. I threw myself into work, said yes to plans, stayed busy enough that I did not have to sit with the quiet too long. But there were moments when the truth slipped through, sharp and uninvited. Like the first time I instinctively reached for my phone to tell her something small and stupid. A joke I knew she would appreciate. A detail no one else would care about. I stared at her name in my contacts and realized I no longer had that right. Not because she was cruel. Because I had waited until she learned how to live without needing to hear from me. I started noticing how often hesitation showed up in other parts of my life. How many decisions I delayed until the moment passed. How often I told myself later was safer than now. Losing her had cracked something open in me, and I could not unsee it. There was another twist I did not expect. Guilt shifted into clarity. Not the kind that makes you spiral, but the kind that sharpens your edges. I stopped romanticizing patience. I stopped telling myself that love is proven by endurance alone. I started seeing courage for what it actually is. Action taken while there is still something to lose. One night, months later, Emily called me. Not out of sadness. Not to reopen anything. She just wanted to tell me she was moving. A new job. A new city. She sounded excited. Nervous in a good way. I congratulated her and meant it. Before we hung up, she said something that surprised me. She said she was glad I told her, even if it came late. That it helped her close a loop she had carried quietly for a long time. That knowing had mattered, even if it did not change the outcome. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time. Not aching, not hopeful, just reflective. I realized then that love does not expire when it goes unspoken. It just transforms into something else. Regret, sometimes. Growth, if you let it. A lesson you did not ask for, but cannot return. I accepted that I did not lose her because I was unlovable. I lost her because I waited for certainty when what was required was courage. And courage does not come from knowing the outcome. It comes from risking it anyway. There was one final piece of acceptance still waiting for me, though, because understanding a lesson is not the same as living differently afterward. And the real ending was still ahead. The real lesson did not hit me in the moment I lost Emily. It showed up later, disguised as something smaller, something easier to ignore. It happened with someone else. Her name was Rachel. Different energy, louder laugh, less patience for ambiguity. We met through work friends, started talking casually, and before I realized it, the pattern was forming again. Texts turning into routines. Comfort settling in. That familiar warmth growing quietly in my chest. And then one night, sitting across from her at a bar with sticky floors and bad lighting, she looked at me and asked a simple question. Not heavy, not loaded, just honest. She asked what I was looking for. I felt it then. That old instinct to stall. To answer around the truth instead of through it. To buy time. I felt the words lining up in my throat and the fear trying to pull them back down. And suddenly, Emily was there in my head. Not her face, not her voice, just the memory of what hesitation costs. I saw the diner booth, the unread message drafts, the relief in her reply instead of hope. I saw the way love does not always disappear when you wait too long, but it does change shape in ways you cannot reverse. So I did something different. I did not give a perfect answer. I did not give a guaranteed one. I gave an honest one. I said what I felt instead of what felt safe. I spoke before certainty arrived. Rachel listened. She did not flinch. She did not demand more than I could give. She just nodded and said she appreciated the clarity. And whether that connection worked out long-term almost does not matter. That was not the point. The point was that I finally understood timing is not about being ready. It is about being willing. Willing to risk embarrassment. Willing to risk rejection. Willing to risk losing something because the alternative is losing it quietly without ever knowing if it might have survived the truth. That night, walking home alone, I felt something I had not felt since before Emily. Not relief. Not closure. Alignment. I stopped telling myself that silence was neutral. I stopped confusing fear with wisdom. I accepted that love demands participation, not observation. Emily did not come back. She was not supposed to. Her role in my life had shifted from partner to teacher, and that lesson had finally landed. There was one last thing left to do, though. One final acceptance that would close the circle completely. And it came not from speaking, but from letting go without bitterness. That was the last step. And it led directly to the ending I did not expect, but needed. The last piece did not come with a conversation or a message. It came quietly, the way most real endings do. It was a random afternoon months later. I was cleaning out old photos on my phone, the kind of task you start without thinking and regret halfway through. Trips I barely remembered. Screenshots of plans that never happened. And then her face appeared on the screen, smiling at something just out of frame. Emily, standing in that same kitchen where I first realized I loved her, wooden spoon in hand, hair pulled back like she always did when she cooked. I did not feel the sharp pain I expected. No punch to the chest. No rush of what-ifs. Just a steady, grounded sadness. The kind that does not ask for anything. The kind that lets you breathe. I sat there for a long time, phone resting in my palm, and something finally settled in me. I had spent so long believing that love needed perfect timing, that it required certainty before courage, that saying the words too early could break something fragile. What I never understood was that waiting too long does the same thing, just slower and quieter. Silence feels safe because it does not risk rejection, but it risks something worse. It teaches the other person how to imagine a future without you in it. Emily did not leave because she stopped feeling. She left because she had to stop hoping. And I had given her no reason not to. I realized then that the story was never about missed timing in a dramatic sense. It was about the small daily choices to stay quiet. The moments I decided later was better than now. The times I chose comfort over honesty. Those choices stacked up until the outcome felt inevitable. There was no villain in it. Not her. Not even me. Really. Just fear dressed up as patience. I deleted the photo. Not out of anger. Not to erase her. But because I did not need it anymore to remember the lesson. She had already given me something more permanent than a memory. I learned that love does not ask you to be ready. It asks you to be present. It asks you to speak while your hands are shaking. To say the thing before you know how it will land. To trust that the risk of losing someone loudly is better than losing them slowly in silence. If I could go back, I would not change everything. I would change one thing. I would say it the first time it felt true, not the first time it felt safe. Because timing is not about waiting for the perfect moment. It is about recognizing that the moment is already here. And courage is not the absence of fear. It is deciding that silence costs more than the truth. That is what waiting taught me. And that is the love I will never again leave unspoken.